Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. HeirofCarthage here, and I've got an interesting one for you today. It is going to be Kush versus Rome. Now, Kush was one of the last factions added into the game, came with the desert DLCs, and a lot of people feel like that there was some power creep going on with them and that they are pretty powerful. And I think I kind of agree with that in terms of the way they're set up. And let's go take a look, though, at how they're going to stack up against a very tough Roman legion. This is not our typical Roman legion. I guess this line of it is. There's a big line of veteran legionaries here. In fact, there's 8 of them. So that is 8 very heavy infantry. They are led out in front by Bloodsworn and Celtic warriors and Sword Band. So I guess that this is some type of auxiliary legion coming from Rome's northern reaches. So I don't know how this is possible. I don't think it's a mod because I'm not using a mod to play the replay. But maybe there's some kind of alternate thing that they were using to allow Rome to have some more auxiliary units. And speaking of auxiliary units, this is heavy horse in the service of Rome. So again, must be pulled from their conquered provinces now as auxiliary units. So there are actually 4 Roman heavy horse units here. Oh, sorry, 5. And then we have a legatus commander. So an interesting Roman legion, no skirmishers, all big hit. There's also a unit of savage dogs. So let's explain what we've got here for the Kush, which I believe is a faction on the other side. We've got some Kushite slave infantry, just kind of javelin fodder up front, protecting some slave slingers, just cheap slingers. And then there's a line of Shotel warriors, and I believe there are 4 of those, and then there are 3 elite Shotel warriors. These are the armored ones in the back. The standard Shotel warriors come with 35 attack, 12 of which is armor piercing, and that is pretty brutal in and of itself. These units have a solid charge bonus. It's not amazing, solid. They have good armor and good defense, but they're not amazing in a grind. The armored Shotel warriors are arguably probably one of the best heavy infantry units in the game. They have really solid attack and brutal weapon damage at 50, 20 of which is armor piercing. They have 95 armor on top of that, which is quite high. Their melee defense is actually not super stellar for this, but basically everything else they have is good. They are going to be mulching armor quite effectively. So cavalry-wise, there are 4 units of desert armor, oh sorry, 3 units of the armored desert cavalry, and then a Kushite Royal Guard general. So this is a very competent melee cavalry, easily better than the heavy horse. The armored cavalry, it's going to be a lot closer. They're only a medium unit. I expect they're going to take heavy losses on the charge to that heavy horse. So we'll see how that one balances out. Otherwise, some of the stats looked fairly similar. Now this cheap barbarian infantry as a front line could be quite effective at clearing out the chaff and taking the initial charges from the Shotel warriors, which the Romans will need. They're going to want to grind down the enemy. Preferably for the Romans here, though, what they would want to do is dominate the cavalry fight and then use the rear charges to help get rid of the armored Shotel warriors, because even in a grind-out fight that typically speaking favors Rome, it may not favor Rome in the case of these armored warriors. In fact, I would guess that it will not. We will see, though, as we get into this. So let's continue to let this play out. Rome is acting quite aggressively here, as they should. They do not have skirmishers. So they need to continue pushing Kush and push Kush. Oh boy, probably sounds bad. But it is what it is. So again, the Romans are going to want to continually push this effort, and they are doing so. They've even got a few units branched off over here. I'm not sure what the attempt here is. It's a veteran legionary and a sword band that's kind of left out here on the right with the legatus. We'll see whether they're going to keep moving up. So the player's just trying to keep up with their micro. A lot like me, I would struggle to keep up with everything across the line. Kush is continuing to hit with their slingers and fall back. Again, this is appropriate. Do the damage that you can do while you can. The Romans have had enough of it, though, and they're going to use their cavalry to try and force the issue, but then pull back. This may just be a way to slow down Kush. Here, though, the Romans actually commit. They did take some somewhat brutal damage there from those javelins on that slave infantry, but then the slave infantry paid a dear price. Right here, they didn't get any javelins off. There's a second round of javelins, most of them missing. But Rome can now use their light infantry to fix some of this, and a couple of the cheap Kushite units do get savaged in an early charge here. The sword band, however, gets savaged by the armored desert cav, and then countercharged by Shotel warriors, so it will die. However, if the veteran legionaries can get in there, this might be a good opportunity to get them without being charged. The slingers are really looking to make that heavy horse pay for that charge, and that is a good target. Another armored desert cavalry charge here, backed up by Shotel warriors. So Rome is starting this engagement against these big-time armor-piercing warriors. Some people mention that the Roman units need to turn off formation attack. I would agree that in most situations they should probably be turning it off, and I think it is off based on the way I'm seeing this veteran legionary get into the fight. That Shotel warrior could find itself in a bit of trouble, but those units are stronger than you might think, and they are extraordinarily good against armor. Here, the single Shotel warrior gets badly outnumbered, and there's nothing to reinforce it. And Roman's making a little bit of a risk here blobbing, but remember that this isn't Warhammer. There's no magic that's going to do this. There are missiles that could punish this blob pretty severely right now. So I believe the Roman player here is just trying to overwhelm on numbers, but they definitely want to clear out that blob and spread their forces out. Here, the veteran legionary is going to get caught by a cavalry and Shotel warrior charge. That is very bad for that veteran legionary. These additional units that were committed here, like these Bloodsworns, should have been used to absorb that charge and let the heavy infantry come in clean. And same thing back here. There is no unit shielding these heavy infantry from the charge of these armored Shotel warriors or this Kushite Royal Guard. And these veteran legionaries are going to pay a very dear price in that engagement. A very dear price. Let's see. It's a heavy horse for the Romans, a little bit slow to get over here and make an impact. And right here, Kush is getting a huge value. 2 units holding up 5. So this is an excellent situation for Kush right here in terms of making their other engagements more effective. That armored Shotel warrior has already killed 20 veteran legionaries despite being outnumbered 2-1. And it will probably continue to do fairly well in that fight. I don't know if it can win 2-1. The Roman did have a cavalry advantage in my opinion, but it's not being recognized yet because the Kush player is able to get reinforcements in a lot of spots. He did get a rear charge here into the armored Shotel warriors. Good. It needs to be done. There are a lot of slingers balled up here, and with the combination of that Celtic warrior and the additional cab, they might be able to shut down the Kushite slingers. And that is exactly what the Roman player is attempting to do. However, some damage is being done here. Look at this, 80 kills on this armored warrior here. The Kush are starting to lose that blob fight over there. The Romans are going to grind them out. 2-1. The armored Shotel warriors have 72 kills, 73 in climbing. Just to give you an idea of how tough they are. They are surrounded and fighting 2-1. Over here, the Royal Guard cavalry is taking a pretty tough fight. It's winning, I believe, but a tough fight with that heavy horse. Some of the Roman heavy horse beginning to rout where the Shotel warriors were assisting. And over here, I believe the Roman heavy horse is winning this fight. However, there's units becoming free nearby. The slave slingers were, for the most part, driven out. The dog handlers are now coming in. I didn't catch where their dogs were sent to earlier, so Romans still have to deal with 2 elite warriors over here, both of which have already killed a great number of legionaries. So both of them well over 100 kills, and that's going to continue to climb. Over here, where it's 2-1 in the Romans' favor, it's probably still not in the Romans' favor. That armored warrior is up to 130 kills and appears to be winning the combat. It says even. So 2-1, and it's even. So the armored Shotel warrior is very powerful. The Roman stayed in this engagement too long and is now going to have their cavalry shut down here. And I believe that Kush is just grinding the Roman player out right here. Too many units ended up in this blob. And I think that this is going to end up having been a critical mistake for the Roman. If all of these units weren't in this blob, some of them could have taken the charges over here for these infantry, in which they would have been successful rather than losing in this case. And then they would have had more help over here where this flank ended up getting cleaned out too. So the blobbing here, I think, ended up costing the Roman because they just didn't have the extra infantry support around their cavalry fights that the Kush player did have, because the Kush player was not blobbed into those fights. And so the numbers game ended up working out against the Roman in certain sectors of the battlefield here. Now, the battle is not over yet. It still says that the Romans got the leg up here, and that may be possible, but I don't think so. I don't see the Roman legatus present anymore either, which means that there could be a little bit of morale fall off here for the Romans. I just don't see any way they can handle these elite warriors without cavalry support. I think the Romans are going to get ground down into a fine paste in their attempt to take these units out. They've got 136 kills with 98 units remaining, and 169 kills with 100 entities remaining here. So there is no prayer for these veteran legionaries. And I did hear some people say that the Romans should be using Evocati cohort and just spam those and really not messing with much else. That could be the case. Now, in this instance where, for whatever reason, the Roman player got access to light barbarian infantry, I disagree with the whole Evocati only thing, because this light barbarian infantry actually could be quite decent since they usually come javelin equipped. Whereas, say, like Vigiles do not. And then the heavy horse, for instance, is actually a decent horse unit, whereas Equites are questionable as far as it's been. No, the Legatus wasn't dead, I just didn't catch it earlier. The Roman still has some ability to stave off a cavalry attack, but I would think the Kush kind of hold the edge. But I don't know, the Roman has their light infantry. That light infantry is really needed badly. The Roman cavalry really needs to be over here too to fend this off, because this is not ideal. So it looks like the Romans going to move their heavy infantry in to block the cavalry charge. It's good and bad. That light infantry, though, is still going to need to be able to get around the flank in time to try and collapse these armored warriors, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And the Roman is not moving around the flanks, kind of just blobbing in and setting up a grind fight. And that grind fight, which is normally to Rome's favor, I do not believe is going to at all be in their favor. This Chotel warrior has just easily rocketed up over 200 kills, and nothing's going to stop it. Like, not with that kind of attack. They still have 50 entities here. The Romans are slow to cut through that armor, and the melee defense is decent, and so the Chotel warriors are just going to continue to mow down the Romans, literally quite like a lawnmower right here. And then there's a whole other unit in reserve. So the Romans can't even handle a single unit right now, and that unit just got battle rhythm on top of it to make things even worse for the Romans. So the kill count on this one could very well exceed 300. The Roman needs some rear charges, but there is armored cavalry nearby. I mean, they need to make an engagement one way or the other. They can't just sit here. They will lose. In fact, the Romans are handily losing, in my opinion, at the moment. So they need something to happen, and it's not going to be easy. Those armored Chotel warriors are absolutely sticking it to these legionaries. They need the support of their commander, who's just a hair too far away at the moment to really give them much morale support. Though we did get a battle rhythm here and a second win. That will help. That will help to stabilize that sum. But again, the Romans are definitely struggling to finish this. Here comes the cavalry charge. The heavy horse, the Legatus, is moving in as well. This single veteran legionary over here, though, is really going to have an uphill battle. These guys, even with the numbers down here, are struggling to deal with that single. So it will be a close battle here. Like, Kush is not going to win this running away. But clearly the Kushite infantry here is just superior to the Romans in this style of combat, which is that when it comes to two units who don't have an overly impressive charge like the Romans or the Chotel warriors, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Chotel warriors have a pretty good charge. It's going to go in favor of the Chotel because their armor piercing is just significantly better. If they could get rid of this Royal Guard, kill that would be huge. Though these Chotel warriors are disciplined, so the death of the general may not turn this, but like I said, it's going to end up being fairly close here. But definitely, in my opinion, it's going to be a Kushite victory. So, an interesting battle. The Bloodsworn are actually somewhat armor-piercing and do have good charge. And if they could have been cycle charging the Chotel warriors from behind while those legionaries were engaged in the front, now they could have potentially laid in some substantial damage there. But it's not going to end up being the case here because Bloodsworn can punch well above their weight for brief periods in the right situation because of that extra AP they get and their cheap cost. So a very close fight here between Zephyr and Louverture. So appreciate both of them joining in. I like both of these factions. Kush is a really cool looking faction. Rome has that ancient aesthetic that's awesome. I really like actually what Rome can do here, bringing in all these auxiliaries technically, which is something that feasibly could have been done historically. So it's interesting to see that be given to Rome, kind of making them an uber faction in a way, right? Having access to these. So that's just curious indeed how that happened. It really made for a fun battle to watch. Hope you all enjoyed it. Appreciate this being sent over to me by Zephyr. You all have a great day, and I will see you soon with some more action in Total War Rome 2.